Hello, and thank you for tuning in to the Flatirons Syndicate Motorsports Podcast. This show is brought to you by Flatirons Tuning, your source for any aftermarket or OEM Subaru parts. Be sure to check out our store at flatironstuning.com and stay tuned with Flatirons Tuning.
Wrap. Okay, so now
Bonus round.
we can talk about methanol.
So here's my thought process here. And I think, Harvey, you were getting your stuff set up when I started to talk to the other guys about this. I'm more or less kind of like heat and turbo efficiency limited in my setup. I don't want to go to like a big turbo, right, which would give me that nice big number, but I would lose a lot of like the meat in my power band, right? Yep. So then I'm looking at other chemical ways to increase my power, right? And also stay cool. Because like we said, the E85 is a large part of my cooling package, right? So even I've considered going to like an E98 or E100 just to maybe push that turbo a little bit harder beyond its efficiency and deal with some of that heat then by increased ethanol. But then I'm thinking, there's no reason for me not to do methanol other than fuel system complexity and just a big tuning difference, right? So I'm kind of curious, one, does that thought process make sense given my short format racing, right? Where, yes, it's going to be like that 3 times more fuel flow or something like that, right? For that methanol. I'm going
3
through
times. Yeah,
something crazy like that, right?
It is.
So I'm going through a quarter tank per run as it is right now. So I have the fuel capacity to make it through a run.
Yeah, your car would change balance. Your car would be completely different balance.
It's a big deal. And like
from the beginning to the end.
The Lemons car I race, right, has like a 40 or 50 gallon fuel cell in it for endurance racing. And from the beginning of the run to the end of the run, I have to keep taking rear brake out of the car. Otherwise, it starts to oversteer into corners on braking just with that amount of fuel load. So, but Subaru is different. It's not as much. It's only, 16 gallons. So maybe I'll go through 12 or 14 gallons a run, something like that. That's doable logistically, fuel capacity wise. But so it's possible. My short format racing.
I've only ever thought about it for a quarter mile.
Right. Well, yeah.
I like it.
So it's like, it's just like, 9 quarter miles or so is what my racing is for the most part, right? Or, whatever, something like that. But so anyways, does the thinking, I don't know if it's exactly 9. We race between like 2 and 5.5 miles, depending on the course, right?
The longest course is 5.5 miles? I thought, wasn't
so.
It's 20 quarter miles.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't do too much math.
Don't do too much math.
Apart.
Okay.
But some math, right, on the methanol part. So I think my thought process makes sense there. I don't know, like I'm on a stock fuel rail right now. I'm on a Roger Clark in-tank pump, but otherwise, like I'm pulling through a Holley fuel mat. Like I don't know what like the flow rate limitations of fuel mats are. I don't know what the flow rate. I mean, I'm guessing I'd have to do aftermarket fuel lines,
half-inch fuel lines probably.
And probably bump base pressure too.
Oh yeah, you'd want to run probably twin injectors with the new 2600 cc injectors from ID, and we can get those to flow about 3,500 cc's per injector. With the extra
is there like a legit hydrolock concern at some point too? Like, is there enough room within the combustion chamber to fit that much fuel before it hydrolocks? Or
I would think we could try it, and there would be a lot of people run methanol in drag GTRs and all sorts of drag engines, especially a low compressing Subaru like 8-to-1 shouldn't be a problem.
Okay.
Well, so this is hydrolocking. Gosh, that's crazy.
Right? That's a crazy thought, right? To be in that ballpark.
Yeah,
well there's like a 5-gallon bucket and just like pour the bucket into the engine.
Just how many 5-gallon buckets? You need 4 or 5-gallon buckets, one for each cylinder, and just like keep just shoving it in there.
Yeah. The other would be maybe a mechanical fuel pump. You might look at a mechanical fuel pump because you need about I would guess about 1,100. You might need as much as 1,000 liters per hour or more. 2,000 liters per hour is possible. It's crazy.
Like you couldn't, I think it's or maybe the new brushless Veyron pump.
Yeah, that one I'll say 2 of those maybe, or the ID one. The ID one that can overclock the injector dynamics pump that I run in the Porsche, that can run up to like 2,000 horsepower of ethanol. So I would think it might support about 500 of methanol or 600 of methanol. And honestly, I would expect to see a significant bump over the ethanol with your same turbo. So if we were at like maybe 400 before, we might be at 500 or so on the methanol.
Could you
That
mix?
sounds pretty cost prohibitive.
Yeah, it's the math, not even just as far as volume, but as far as like, okay, the fuel setup is going to be wacky. Like, oh, you just need those new ID 2600s, 2 of them per cylinder.
Right.
8 injectors.
8 injectors.
And I mean, so that's where like the Veyron pump, actually, if you look at it, is pretty affordable. But
Sure.
I mean, we're talking like a whole, like it's more affordable than a lot of pumps out there, right?
Yeah.
But the cost, like I'm not aware of an off-the-shelf dual injector setup, so I'm having to machine my own. They are.
No, they're out there. Yeah, it's since the injectors got better, they're a lot less common. But before we had like the Bosch-based injectors and the ID injectors and stuff, the dual TGV housings were fairly common.
Yeah, I feel like even Radia might even have one still. Or somebody actually saw one not that long ago.
Go to a Subaru swap meet, and it's one of the old school guys. They'll have what you need.
The Forza manifold.
Yeah, there you go.
But no, and you know the cool thing about that also is you could just ditch your intercooler; it would not matter a bit.
Do you think it's good enough?
Wow.
Even in my not drag racing, but even in the hill climb situation.
Yeah. Most guys I know running methanol. Most methanol cars don't run intercoolers. I know Tony Palo does it T1 on his GTRs, but only for fun.
And it's as those drag racing.
Yeah.
Or is that Do you think it would keep up over more than 10 seconds?
Horsepower. They're running like 6s and 7s.
Wow.
Well, so to Tasso's question, do you think that the methanol flow would be able to keep up with the heat load over, say, a 2-minute run or a 3-minute run versus just a short drag pull?
Yeah, you're going through so much of it.
Yeah, it's going to cool that cylinder. It'll cool it down.
I mean,
John, that sounds like a lot less drag than an intercooler. Maybe I'll sell my Plasma Man intercooler and buy one injector.
You mean a 5-gallon bucket?
Yeah,
or an
we'll just get like a garden hose and stick it right in the top of the intake.
Honestly, I want to build a methanol powered drag car someday for a Subaru that's local. So not my own, but anybody that wants to do that, contact me and we'll throw something together for you.
So
it's going to be expensive.
Because we're doing this as a bonus, let's kind of go back and let's kind of lay out why methanol and what the desired benefits of running methanol compared to even ethanol are.
Sure. So we know that when you run methanol injection on a car as a power adder, you can gain pretty significant gains. And I mean, you're only using it as a small amount. When we replace all of the fuel with methanol, those gains are magnified. So 91, say I make 300 horsepower on 91 and I make, say, 350 on E85, I might make as much as 330 on just methanol injection, which is an additive to the gasoline. And
91 in methanol injection.
Yes. Yeah. So if I'm just using a small amount of methanol, I can see some pretty big gains. Now, you can only imagine that if I were to do that, instead of doing that, replace the whole fuel system with methanol, the gains should be much larger. So we're talking.
Hold on, Hart. Let's back up because you brought it up. Let's talk about methanol injection and how that works. Like why would you do it, and why would you pick up, say, 30 horsepower from just a little bit of methanol injection?
Sure. Yeah. So when we're running a car on 91 octane, the octane may not be high enough as we raise the boost to continue. You get detonation and such. Okay. By adding methanol, it increases the octane, but it's also a fuel, so it also richens up. Typically, those kits add additional fueling with no monitoring or metering, so they just are adding fuel into the thing on their own. And what happens when we see that is the system richens up. So the process for tuning a methanol injected car is first you complete the 91 tune in a safe manner, and then you turn on this methanol injection. And what you'll always see is a big drop in power. The reason for that is you've just richened it up dramatically with this methanol injector. So at that point, a good tuner or a tuner that's trying to, there's a number of reasons you might use methanol. I would stop there if it was my car because I'm just trying to get safety out of it and I'm worried about hot days. Right. But most of my customers that are using it, they're like, no, I want horsepower. So at that point, I take a car, say we were on 91. So on 91, I might tune to 11-to-1 air fuel ratio on the gasoline. If it was high octane fuel, I might go for 11.7 to 1. So because I've added that little methanol injector, I'm now at 10.4 to 1. So I want to be at 11.7 instead of the 11 before I added it. So I'm going to start pulling gasoline out, not methanol. I'll start pulling gas out of this mixture on the tune. And what happens is I get it to 11.7 to 1, and then I can add some timing as well. So now that my octane is high, at that point, at the same boost level, I can add a couple of degrees, maybe 1 or 2, and I'll see that 30 horsepower gain. It's a little bit leaner. It's got more timing in it. It's just fleshed out at that point. And then because of the higher octane, I can then start to raise boost as well, where it may have been knocking on the 91 tune.
Okay, so you have pump gas. So like all the fuel is pump gas. And then with methanol, you're adding fuel, but it's this alcohol-based fuel. So you're bringing in pump gas, alcohol, then you can bring the gasoline down to. So basically, you're controlling the gasoline injection to get to the target EFR or air fuel ratio that you want. But you're adding in this alcohol-based fuel, which has a lot of these cooling properties that we're talking about, and it's also more detonation resistant. So you're kind of in the combustion chamber making your own effectively methanol percentage, like effectively like an E85, to get some of those benefits. But you've got now 2 fueling systems: the methanol injection system and the pump gas system that you're having to kind of get to work together to do that.
Yeah, and you probably actually quantify it and say, oh, I'm running M5, which is 5% methanol, or something really small. And to get such big gains out of that is wonderful. Now, I want to tell you the other side of that whole story, which is the side that the customer isn't looking at. And the reason I would have stopped in the very beginning when I turned it on my own car is because now that I've taken away that gasoline, what happens when the nozzle gets clogged is it leans out drastically. So it's going from 11.7 to like 12.7 to 1 or 12.5. Yeah. And at the same time, the octane drops drastically. And I've already added in all this timing and some boost.
Those methanol injection systems, you've got it there. Sometimes they're on, sometimes they're not. You've got nozzles. Like the other thing that's crazy. So like in the direct injected world, meth injection has made a comeback because you just hit this limit as far as how much fuel you can get into the engine because the direct injected the injectors are so much different and bigger because the fuel pressure is so much higher. There's nothing else you can do. So with the methanol injection, that's where you can kind of add that extra 5, 10, 20% at the bottom and get control back with the direct injectors up top. But like now on some of the 6-cylinder cars like the BMWs, what I'm seeing is like 8 nozzle meth injection setups, because the other kicker is like you can't use just one nozzle to inject all of this methanol and hope that it evenly gets to all the cylinders.
Distributes.
You have to make sure that you really have like an even amount of methanol that's going into all the different cylinders, that it's consistent, that it's reliable, and like it's a whole separate system that you're putting in there. So the reliability just gets way more complicated because you're adding this piggyback fuel system to the standard one.
Yeah, and if even one of those clogs, you're going to have a lean cylinder that's detonating and damaging.
Game over, because you're pushing so hard because the methanol works so well when it's there. You take it away, and it's just bad things happen really quickly.
Yeah, I'll say meth injection failing is the only time I have seen, and this has been like 3 times in the last 20 years, or no, maybe 15 years I've been doing this. I have seen 3 times meth injection kits fail and break all 4 pistons at the same moment. And it's typically when we see engines fail, you guys have seen it. You break
like one or two.
Yeah, like breaking all 4 is a trick. It's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Well, and so then to expand on this for my application in just my racing class, we're not allowed to inject stuff. Like, I mean, fuel, yes, but we're not allowed ancillary injectables.
You can't do it.
The idea is, it keeps people from just running nitrous all the time and propane and all sorts of other weird power adders that are out there. So for me, then that means incorporating this into my fuel, which is part of the reason I went ethanol based in the first place, right?
And that's
actually another alcohol blend.
Setting way back, E85 has not been around forever. And E85 came around, what was it, like around 2007, 8, something like that?
I would say Larry started introducing me to it in 2005.
Okay.
Larry, Hot Rod, yeah.
But it wasn't readily available at that point.
No, I had to drive to co-ops and stuff.
Yeah.
Weird places.
But that was meth injection was kind of out there. People were using it to augment fueling and to get these cooling properties. But then that was the brilliance of an ethanol-based fuel, is you're not adding a piggyback fueling system. You're just putting the different fuel in the tank and using the stock fueling system and all the standard controls of the stock fueling system to then use this different ethanol-based fuel and get all the benefits for it. So what Tasso, what you're talking about doing is the same thing, but with methanol. But the reason that isn't like M85 is because it's like, well, you could sounds like you could go from one methanol gas station to the next methanol gas station and fill up again. And just kind of leapfrog from gas station to gas station and hopefully get where you need to go.
Right. And so how hard would it be to start
that cold?
Right. Well,
oh my God.
Awesome, right? Like every car has a 100-gallon gas tank just so we can all run methanol all the time. And the roads just smell amazing.
Here's the other thing. I want to point one final thing out about methanol versus ethanol. Ethanol, I've been working with ethanol for over 30 years professionally. I was a bartender before I was a tuner. And ethanol is what we drink in beer. It is very safe for the human body to be around. Methanol can cause dementia and permanent damage to the liver, and it's transdermal. So if you get methanol on your skin, it can destroy your liver. Exposure to methanol is no joke. But what's cool about it, it burns cleaner. So when you're burning it, the guy behind you isn't going to breathe it. But I'm more worried about people handling it and being in the room with like fumy-rich mixtures. Methanol is a very dangerous liquid in its raw state. Yeah.
But what I'm almost thinking, Tasso, for your application is maybe just go to E100, because that's a lot more of a known quantity and it's readily available, and it's not going to take these Herculean efforts of change to the fueling system, and see if you can get closer to where you want to be benefit wise.
No, I don't think he'll get any power. He's like at E70, it maxes out, in my opinion. We can try,
but
the cooling would improve.
Could I overdrive the turbo a bit more and use the extra 15% of alcohol to help cool that a bit, and then cheat essentially just a little bit more? Or
I don't think you'll see any gains if you go to E100. We can try it. I don't mind, but I typically don't see gains, but I've tried before, and even pushing harder, it hasn't been good. Typically it just stresses the fuel pump more.
Well, then I wonder about the intercooler, focusing instead on the intercooler instead of on the fueling, because could you spray like compressed CO2 on the intercooler to cool it if it's not fueling?
What about the fifth injector? Have you guys ever heard of that? Where they have an injector pre-turbo?
Yeah, that was like the meth injection or wet nitrous kits where you'd actually add.
So I think, and the reality of any racing series, right, is if you're gonna work in the gray area of the rules, it's just about whether or not someone that you're beating gets mad about it.
Sure.
So probably I could run nitrous until someone, complained about it or protested it, right? Running, does that count as an injectable that is not allowed in the same sense as nitrous or propane would be if I did an earlier injection event?
If it's not going into the engine, I don't think it would fall under the same category. Because if you're just using, because you can actually get nitrous sprayers that just spray onto the intercooler to freeze it.
Right. So I spray water already, and I'm because that's not an injectable, right? I'm cooling my oil cooler, my radiator, and my intercooler. They each have an individual sprayer, and I can, before the run, depending on the ambient air temp and stuff like that, I can decide whether or not I actually need to spray the radiator, this or that or whatever. But at its maximum amount, right, with the 85% ethanol in the fuel and all these sprayers and a bunch of other stuff, I'm not getting into, I could talk for, I don't know, a half hour probably on the things I've done to try and keep this motor cool.
Sure.
But right, so at the moment spraying, I just spray distilled water. And the only reason I do distilled water is so I don't end up with, as the water evaporates off the coolers, I don't end up with a bunch of sediment buildup on the actual radiators, right, and decrease their cooling. I've thought about spraying like just off the shelf rubbing alcohol on the coolers.
Oh, that's too,
I think
it'll blow up.
Well, I think the winter blend of the windshield washer fluid, it has methanol in it, and so you could spray that.
Yeah.
But then it leaves
evaporates
residue.
faster.
It does leave
Purple.
a residue.
I use it on my car.
Yeah.
You could just mix alcohol and water and it wouldn't be flammable.
Right. And so that's sort of what I thought is, just pour a bit of aerobic alcohol in with my, distilled water or something like that.
From your E85. Just pour some of the E85 on top.
And just spray gas all over the motors.
and then there'd be gasoline separating out and lighting on fire. Yeah.
That wouldn't be.
I will tell you. As long as it points the right direction, it's just jet propulsion, right?
Yeah.
So,
so I will tell you, I actually looked at using a nitrous spray cooler to cool the intercooler on the Pikes Peak car way back at the beginning. And even a 10-gallon tank, they said, was pretty much, it would only be good for about, I think it was 2 minutes of continual use. And so that was like, I realized like even at wide open throttle, we're going to be probably at wide open throttle for more than a couple minutes. Like we need a gigantic tank. And so that doesn't make sense.
And it runs into a weird other rule that's not even meant to capture that, but we have a rule that just says no compressed gas storage. And the idea is that you don't end up with the boost reservoirs, like some of the early Ford rally cars and stuff like that. Sure. So we can't fill a bumper with boost pressure to then use whenever we want, kind of thing is the idea. But it would get caught in the no compressed gas storage for nitrous, no matter where it was sprayed on the car. And stuff like that.
So yeah, I mean, I think adding an alcohol to whatever you're putting on the intercooler to get more of a cooling effect would be something to try at least.
How much water do you run with you, Tasso, on a run? Like 5 gallons?
Not even. So I run the wagon washer bottle in the stock location because it has that second motor that would spray the rear. And on top of that motor is just above where like the windshield washer sprayer would be. So that way you always have a little bit of windshield washer, even if the rear windshield runs out. And then, so the way I set that up too, just really quick, the wiring harness for all the WRXs is the same between the wagons and the sedans. So the wiring to power that motor is still in the engine compartment and it's still in the cluster and the steering, like the column switches and stuff. So I just hijacked that and I just turn on what would be the rear window washer with a switch on the dash. And
that's pretty cool.
Then I timed it before any race I'm going to. I say, my expected race times are going to be 5 minutes or so at Land's End, I think, right? And so I'll go in the garage and I'll fill the washer bottle with distilled water, which is about 1 gallon roughly, right? And I'll time it out to make sure I don't run out of washer fluid by the end of that run. And so then when I'm using it, as I'm sitting on the line, because like the intercooler has been sitting there heat soaking as I'm waiting to go, right? I'll turn the sprayers on probably about halfway between the time when I move from the staging point up to the line and then actually start. I'll kind of wait. If you look at my YouTube videos, you can see me reach up and turn the switch on. And so at that point, and for the most part, I have plenty of reserve. So I'll go through on the shorter courses, 1/2 gallon, on the longer courses, 3/4 gallon over the course of a run with 3 nozzles spraying. Because I have a big oil cooler up front.
But just with the factory washer reservoir pump? Or different pump? That one. Okay.
Nope. Yeah, just the
factory one. I was just thinking of your weight offset, going to methanol, losing an intercooler, the shorter charge piping, not packing everything with mud in your wet radiators and all that other stuff. If you could actually justify the weight offset as actually being a positive instead of a negative, especially with it being in the back of the car.
Right. So I don't know like exactly what the weight, like density wise, of methanol is versus gasoline or something like that. I know a full tank is about 100 gallons. Is it? So it's a little lighter. But a full Subaru tank with gasoline is about 100 pounds, more or less, right? So if I'm having to carry an extra 50 to 60 pounds of fuel to make it through a run, that adds up. I mean, I don't think you get 60 pounds. Now it's better weight, right? It's just behind the center of gravity, down low, right? Versus hanging off in front of the front axle, but it's a lot more. So I don't know if the weight advantage.
And for a full race.
Yeah.
Well, and then the other kicker is like if you make all of that change, like your car would work for a hill climb, for a short hill climb, but like you could not run stage rally like that.
Yeah.
Could you imagine doing open lapping at high plains? You wouldn't even be able to get like 2 laps in. Like, oh, I got to pull over. I'm out of fuel.
One lap.
Mm-hmm.
One lap at a time.
Yeah, you'd have, a warm up, your heater, and then you'd have to coast in more or less on your cool down, right?
Indy cars used to run methanol. Imagine that.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, and there's all sorts of, like toluene and stuff like that they used to run back in like the Formula One days and give everybody cancer immediately. So you look at older race cars putting out tons of black smoke, even though they're not diesels. It's not always just super rich mixtures. Some of these additives they used for octane boosting made it burn real black and stuff. But those were that's more or less a banned substance in some countries because it's so carcinogenic.
Well, I mean, to me,
leaded fuel.
Right.
Well, leaded, right, but.
I mean, to me, it's like the limitations on what you could do with the car to make all of these fueling changes to be able to run 100% methanol. I mean, that's really, I mean, you're putting your race car in basically like it's a one application thing. It's like you want to come back out to high plains.
I couldn't go back to stage rally even as it is. High plains I could pull off.
You could do high plains, you could do track
like
days.
Stage rally now. Even when I made, let's see, with the restrictor in the car, I made like 190 horsepower on E85, and I would still come in from a stage loop on fumes. Making twice that amount of power now, I'm using that much more fuel. I couldn't complete a stage loop as it is, and obviously a restrictor and this and that, and there'd be a switch back and forth. Yes, it's a bigger jump because that fueling system for methanol would just be ridiculous trying to go back to a race gas for the fuel mileage. But I don't know. I mean, it's a thought I've had. Generally, I've come to the same conclusion kind of this conversation is, where maybe that there's definitely some benefits, but I mean, especially on my race budget, I don't know if I could pull off the logistical support to get that much fuel into the engine at a time.
Yeah.
I would like to try, I think, an E100 to see if we could even just overdrive something a little bit more and cheat our thermal efficiency kind of stuff a little bit.
The other thought that I have is if you're just using that washer pump to spray those 3 nozzles, you're probably not moving very much pressure or very much volume. I've actually been pleasantly surprised how much luck we've had using that, ironically, the AEM meth injection kit, but to spray water on the Pikes Peak car, because it's a much higher volume and pressure pump, and you have such better control mechanisms for when it goes off and how. So it's to the point where so you're using a gallon over, like, say, a 3 or 4 minute run. We're able to do 5 gallons in an 11-minute run, right? And so it's a much greater volume of liquid, because you have this control, and we're only running it at wide open throttle now. So
and I mean, it's what we're looking for is surface area to volume ratio, and by increasing the atomization of whatever the cooling is doing, right?
Mm-hmm. And that's so, even their nozzles. They have adjustable nozzles,
right. And so I'm using garden misters. And just off the shelf garden tubing, and then the sprayer bottle. Could it be better? Yes, but I'm in $5 on my system, not including the cost of the switch. So
that meth injection kit is not that expensive. It's just a couple $100 compared to all these crazy injectors. Because I mean, what does a set of 2,600 injectors cost? I mean, good grief.
Sure. Well, even there, but on my existing fueling system, I have the headspace to probably go to E100. Because I'm on a 1300X or something like that right now. So it's, or no, am I? Or on a 15? I don't know. I don't remember. But I only get to like a 80% duty cycle on E85. So I think I have the headspace in the injector with making no changes to try a little bit more ethanol. So on top of the other stuff, I mean, I have my overrun fueling is on all the time. The car is always injecting fuel. There's no, I don't know if anyone's actually listening to this bonus episode, but your car probably stops fueling in overrun condition. Like when you're off throttle on RPM, your car, Mr. Listener or Mrs. Listener, is probably stopping fueling. Mine fuels all the time, which is part of what some of these pop and bang tunes that people always go to their tuners looking for is turning overrun fueling back on. But mine's not.
It's also coolant cylinder. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So I want as much alcohol as possible, constantly washing over everything I can. I'm not worried about reducing cylinder temps to the point where I'm having fuel wash issues. because it's running so hot anyways. I need that cooling. So that's another part of my cooling package and my cooling strategy,
right?
You know, in order to try and maintain my tiny little stock radiator.
And you want all the spectators on the side to know that you're running ethanol.
Yeah, right. Poor man's anti-lag. So
there you go. There you go.
So.
Well, let's wrap up this bonus conversation here, and thanks everybody for watching and listening to this bonus episode. I guess at this point, geez.
Yeah.
But yeah,
these are the conversations I love having. Like this is where the podcast started. Was us like, dude, what about methanol?
what if I ran methanol in the rally car?
Could I do this reasonably?
Yes.
And so I love having these little conversations.
It's a really fun head scratcher for sure.
Well, it was an honor. Thanks, man.
Yeah. Thanks Harvey for joining us. Thanks for sitting in on this one as well.
Harvey.
Yeah, you're the royalty. You're the royalty.
Tasso.
We're all just honored to have you here.
There you go.
Yeah, I'd be honored to go downhilling with you.
Someday.
Let's do it.
Someday.
In Left Hand Canyon. Absolutely.
Yeah, soon. It's supposed to be a secret. Everyone acts like Left Hand is a secret, but
it is not a secret anymore. It's so overrun.
All right. Well, we're going to stop it there for this episode, and thanks for listening. And as always, stay tuned with Flatirons Tuning.
Thanks everyone for tuning in to the Flatirons Syndicate Motorsports Podcast. Once again, we'd like to let you know that your support is what makes this show possible. Be sure to check out our online store at flatirons.com for any of your aftermarket or OEM Subaru parts needs. And as always, stay tuned with Flatirons Tuning.